Kazzy from Crafty Creations. This video is all about sponges and how to use them, how to get the right consistency, and also as well I'm going to touch up on stencils like these ones, because a lot of people I find tend to struggle to get the right consistency with sponges, and since I'm doing one about finger dubbers anyway, I might as well take the time to show you. So there we go. Okay, so there's many different types of sponges that you can get. Some work better for others than other people, so have a practice with different types. You really want to get a good collection of sponges because the most hygienic way to use a sponge is one sponge per face, not per colour. So you really want to get a good collection. The first sponge I'm going to show you is this one. It's a high density sponge. As you can see, its holes are a lot smaller, a lot closer together, and this just allows for a good collection of colour. They're great for rainbow cakes, these ones. Then there's also antibacterial sponges like these. They've got the slightly larger holes, but as you can imagine by the name, they've got antibacterial properties, which means they're somewhat more hygienic. I tend to use these most, especially on the little kiddie faces. You can cut them down to size. They actually come as a whole sponge like that. Obviously, that's not the adjoining sides. I tend to cut them in half so that I can have one flat edge for the face and then use the corner for blending. Very handy to have a lot of those. You then get some other sponges like these ones. These are from Snazaroo. As you can see, they originally came as a whole one as well. And again, cut these in half. They're great for smaller faces. They're high density again, so they pick up a lot of paint. Very handy to have, like I said, quite a collection of sponges. Then there's the petal sponges, like this one here. I'll put in the comments who it's by, because I've completely blanked. Petal sponges are great for smaller faces. You can use the edge. If you want to, you can create actual petal designs using a flat edge of it. They are quite handy for getting into those corners of eyes. I tend to use them on the smaller children because of how small and dainty and easy and pointy they are to use. They have a variety of uses, those. Then we have stippler or stippling sponges like this. It looks like something out of a filter in my fish tank, I've got to be honest. But these are great for, well, I use them most for creating beards on faces, because they will pick up the paint, but they will leave massive gaps in the paint, and it will create, as you can imagine, a stipple effect. And it really, yeah, like I said, I use them most probably on pirate faces just because of the consistency they provide. Then you've got things called sponge mops, I think most commonly known as. This one I think is a tag one. It's probably the one I use most often, as you can tell. I will touch up in another video, a video all about cleanliness, which will include the best way to wash and prep your sponges. This one's still a bit wet from where I was using it earlier, or where I was cleaning it earlier, sorry. These are superb for creating rainbow or confetti cake designs. If you look on my channel, there is a video all about confetti cakes. I love these. I use them a lot. They're also great for base work, especially if you don't really want to get your hands dirty on the sponges too much. Some people prefer to use these. So that's them. And then the last sponge I'm going to show you today is a finger dabber, and these are my lifeline. They literally, they've got a hole you can put your fingers in. They're quite universal as well. I've got quite fat fingers, I'll be honest. And these are great for stenciling. If you get the consistency right on them, you can just create little like cloudy effects. I think now most people would probably recommend that if you're going to do stencil work, you invest in these. These have been by far the most useful sponge I've ever got, and I love them a lot. I love them a lot. So those are your different types of sponges. Next, I'm going to show you paint consistency and how to use them. So I'm just going to grab a couple of different types of stencil, and really we're going to focus more on how to properly load your sponge, and how to get the consistency right so that your stencil doesn't bleed, because that's a problem a lot of people I see tend to have. So I'm going to just spritz my cake. It's already been activated once today. I will do a video on how to activate your paints properly. That will be in the Basic Bootcamp series. So I'm only going to give it one small spritz because I've already done a lot of what is required, and I don't want the paint to get too wet. That's where it goes quite wrong, is when you've got wet paint. As you can see here, it is kind of quite wet at the very moment, quite creamy. I want to just keep activating it for a little bit longer because I want a very thick consistency, almost gloopy, like it's starting to go here. Sticky kind of paint. This is perfect. It's, you know, it's sticky. It's not going to run anywhere. In fact, I've got kind of like a meringue trick that you can kind of shake it and you just get like lines like that. That's it. So that's what I want for that. And when you load your brush, your sponge even, I'm going to use a finger dabber. Really get it on there. Don't be afraid of that. But when you apply it to your stencil, what you're looking for, and I'm just going to show you on here, is you're looking for a light, fluffy consistency. Think fluffy Mary Berry, not a soggy bottom style consistency. If you've got the, you know, the stippling type effect, that's where you've gone right. If you're pressing too hard or if your paint's too wet, what you'll get is like rings around here, if you can see. And I'll be honest with you, that is what's causing the bleeding. You're either pressing too hard or your paint's too wet. It's as simple as that. You just want a nice light consistency, because if you need to go over it, you can always go over it more than once. And then you're just going to apply your stencil and tap. Make sure you put your stencil, keep your stencil still with a couple of fingers. Obviously, wriggly children, that's going to be harder. And just go over it. Don't be afraid to go over it a few times. Keep your taps quite light. If you want quite a powerful colour, you're obviously going to have to go over it more than if you don't. And when you pull it away, there you go. Look at that. See, that's perfect. There's no bleed. You can see what the design is. It's wonderful. I'm just going to show you again with the stars. So just tap on. Take your time, as much time as you physically can anyway. Obviously, as you do this more, you'll get better at it. And again, when you pull it away, there you go. You've got a perfect stars. There's no bleed. I'm just going to show you what happens if you're pressing too hard or if your paint's too wet. You can see the stencil's being pulled away from the paint because it's too wet. This is worst case scenario. You're obviously getting splashback, and when you pull it away, you've blurred. You've blurred everything. It's terrible. That's what happens when your paint's too wet. Even if you don't think it's pulling away, but your paint's still too wet, you're still going to get that blurring. It really is about keeping it as dry as possible and not being afraid to just keep layering until you get the colour you want. And that's it. Sponges, again, I'm going to use a high density sponge. Sorry, just give my fingers a quick clean. This sponge is actually, I'm going to use an antibacterial sponge just to show you can achieve a good effect with it. And I'm going to borrow one of my rainbow cakes, which is this one. I think this is Blurred Lines, unless I'm incorrect. Yes, it's Blurred Lines by Diamond FX. As you can see, it's not been activated in a while though. So I'm going to give it a quick couple of spritzes. My sponge is dry, my paint is not, and I'm just going to work, really work that paint. Load it up, make sure it's activated properly, make sure it's creamy, make sure it's dry, make sure there's no lines dripping through. Really get in there and work it. And when you're fully loaded, you might feel a kind of almost slight tug as you pull it out of your paint. That's what you want, just that slightest tug. And then when you pull it down, you'll get, a nice line there. What you want to do when you use sponges is to just make sure that, like the stencils, you're keeping your sponge quite dry. And when you apply it onto the skin, if I show you here, like that, probably be better. There we go. You want to dab it, because as you dab, you'll create a more blended effect, and the more you go into it, like this, you'll see it just blends beautifully. Whereas if you streak it like that, it can work sometimes. Mine probably has because it's quite dry, but you can see there you've got quite a streak. I don't know if you can see that, but there are streaky lines there, whereas obviously you don't get it with that. And I think you actually get quite a fuller colour when you stipple as compared to when you streak. And that's it. That's how to use your sponges. Thank you for watching. The next video will be all about sanitation, and like and subscribe. Loves you, bye.